Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitya Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gora Hari Bol. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 10, Text 22. The chapter is called Divisions of the Creation. Divisions of the Creation. Please repeat. Gaur Ajo Maheshash Krishnaha Sukaro Gavayoruruhu Dvishapha Pashavas Cheme Avirustra Sattama Gaurajo Mahishash Krishnaha Sukaro Gavayoruruhu Dvishapha Pashavas Seme Avirustracha Sattama Gaurajo Maheshas Krishnaha Sukaro Gavayoruruho Dvishapha Pashavas Cheme Avir Ustracha Sattama Gaho, the cow, Ajaha, the goat, Mahishaha, the buffalo, Krishnaha, a kind of stag. Sukaraha, hog. Gavayaha, a species of animal. Ruruhu, deer. Dvishapaha, having two hoofs. Pashavaha, animals. Cha, also. Ime, all these. Avihi, lamb. Ustraha, camel. Cha, and. Sattama, O purest. Translation. O purest Vidura, of the lower animals, the cow, goat, buffalo, Krishna stag, hog, Gavaya animal, deer, lamb, and camel all have two hooves. Please repeat. O purest Vidura, of the lower animals, the cow, goat, buffalo, Krishna stag, hog, Gavaya animal, deer, lamb, camel, all have two hooves. There are no purports. I'll read a few more verses and we come to a purport. So I continue the verses. Karo shos vatara goraha sharapa chamari tatha ete chaika sappa kshit kshattaha shino pancha nakkan pashun. Translation. The horse, mule, ass, gora, sharapa, bison, wild cow all have only one hoof. Now you may hear from me about the animals who have 5 nails. Shwa, Shargalo, Vrikko, Vyagro, Majaraha, Shashak, Shalakao, Simha, Kapir, Gajaha, Kurmo, Godacha, Maha, Radayaha. Translation. The dog, jackal, tiger, fox, cat, rabbit, sojaru, lion, monkey, elephant, tortoise, alligator, goshapa, etc. all have 5 nails in their claws. They are known as panchanakas, or animals having 5 nails. Kankara krida bakashena bhasha baluka barihana hamsa sarasha chakrava kaholu kadaya gogaha. The heron, vulture, crane, hawk, bhasha, baluka, peacock, swan, sarasha, chakravaka, crow, owl, and others are the birds. Arvak shotastu navamaha kshattare kavidoninam rajodikaha karma pora dukhe cha sukhamaninaha. Translation. The creation of the human beings, who are one species only, and who stock the eatables in the belly, is the 9th in the rotation. In the human race, the mortal passion is very prominent. Humans are always busy in the midst of miserable life, but they think themselves happy in all respects. So there's a purport here by His Divine Grace, says Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The human being is more passionate than the animals, and thus the sex life of the human being is more irregular. The animals have their due time for sexual intercourse, but the human being has no regular time for such activities. The human being is endowed with a higher, advanced stage of consciousness for getting relief from the existence of material miseries. But due to his ignorance, He thinks that his higher consciousness is meant for advancing in the material comforts of life. Thus, his intelligence is misused in the animal propensities, eating, sleeping, defending, and mating, instead of spiritual realization. By advancing in material comforts, the human being puts himself into a more miserable condition. But, illusioned by the material energy, he always thinks himself happy, even while in the midst of misery. Such misery of the human life is distinct from the natural, comfortable life enjoyed even by the animals. So it's a very short purport. Today is also the advent of Madhvacharya, so I'll be speaking about him. I compiled a few notes on Madhvacharya, life of Madhvacharya. Few words about this purport. This purport itself is very clear. The material world is such. There's cause. There are reasons why we are here in the material world in the first place. And sadly, we came here being illusioned, thinking we can be happy. So the living entity is wandering in the cycle of birth and death since time immemorial. There are 8,400,000 species of life. And as Vyasa Dev in the previous verses described some of the groups, different species, animals with different features, but they all have a similar characteristics. They work under the cycle of nature, Mother Nature, Prakriti, Krishna's nature. So they have a regularity in their bodily functions, natural instincts. So the animals are innocent in one sense, although they're going through that cycle of birth and death in the material world. Human beings, as Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, are very passionate. We are endowed with a higher intellect. We have the capacity to analyze. We have the capacity to comprehend and realize things, provided if we have that desire, if we have that intention. A human being meant to use his intelligence for a higher purpose. If we don't, then we cannot be classified as a civilized human being. Until human beings in the mode of passion, they are prompt to act in a certain way, Rajaguna, Tamaguna, and some Sattva guna. Mainly Rajaguna and Tamaguna, especially in this day and age. People lost their sanity. What is God consciousness? What is divine consciousness? What's the purpose of life? Very basic questions anyone should inquire. So these are very difficult problems for a human being, because a human life requires responsibility, brings responsibility for the living entity. We are responsible for our actions. So, on the other hand, if we utilize our intelligence, God-given intelligence, to understand the self and our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then naturally things make sense to us. We want to act in a certain way. We want to regulate our lives. We want to please Krishna, the Yagna Purusha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Our life should be offered as a sacrifice for His pleasure. So we endeavor to please Krishna, the Supreme Personality. This is the only way to regulate the senses. This is the only way to control the mind, when we actually engage in loving devotional service to Krishna. Because we, living entities in the material world, and we are contaminated, then we need the guidance of the superior authorities. This is when Krishna reveals transcendental knowledge, Divya Jnana. We have the Mahajanas, 12 Mahajanas, and they reveal transcendental knowledge to the benefit of all living entities. We can see from the Shastras, especially from Bhagavad Purana, Srimad Bhagavatam, that the great avatars come descending time to time. Yuga avatars, Lila avatars, Purusha avatars, Guna avatars, they all have a particular purpose and function, but ultimately Krishna comes in various forms to enlighten the living entities, the fallen jivas in the material world, to have some kind of sanity. Sanity can be understood as God consciousness. Without God consciousness, there's no question of sanity. And we can see the material world as such now. We can all see very clearly. We don't have to look far. So much suffering, so much pain on every level, individually, collectively, globally. People don't know how to act. They have no proper conception of being civilized. They call themselves civilized, but that's not like that. Civilization has to be in the framework of transcendental knowledge, real knowledge. Otherwise, we cannot be called civilized. We may have a body of a human being, 2 legs, 2 arms, but if we act like an animal, then how can we be a human being? So we have to understand what is to be a human being. That requires some knowledge in the first place, some wisdom. And when we study these Shastras, sacred knowledge, then by the grace of the great Mahajanas and the representations, we have some understanding that human life is meant more than just satisfying our senses. Sensual satisfaction is available. Gratification of the senses are available for all species of life. Human beings should rise above these animalistic propensities and understand that human life has a sublime goal. There's a higher purpose, and that is to realize the self, the pure Jiva Atman, a transcendental being, a divine personality who is actually eternally connected to Krishna. But in the material world, we have the opportunity to be in denial. So there's an illusion created here. Krishna has his potencies. So we have, as we know, Maya Shakti, in Krishna's creation, Durga Devi, many representations of Maya Shakti. So Maya has many translations, obviously, but ultimately comes down to material energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we are subdued by these forces, namely Rajaguna, Tamaguna, some level of Sattva Guna. So we in this matrix of the 3 modes of material nature to various degrees. But we can break through these clutches of the material energy by taking shelter of a higher process, especially divine help. And it comes down to us in many different levels. Obviously, the spiritual master is number 1, who represents Divya Jnana to us. A timeless wisdom, transcendental knowledge, the Vedic Shastras, sacred knowledge, and the divine instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, especially Bhagavad Gita, which is very relevant to all of us. And then, by their grace, we can gradually develop our devotional service patiently and with determination. We require determination to understand and realize. One thing we understand and we realize that actually this is our constitutional position, our eternal, original position to love and serve Krishna, To serve Krishna, obviously we have to understand what that means. So, as Krishna says in many pages in the Bhagavatam and also in the Bhagavad Gita, that those who actually accept the spiritual master, a divine representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and remain in the service of Vaishnavas, they are the devotees. They are the ones who actually progressing in spiritual life. We cannot make advancement by our own, so we need help. We need a teacher, we need guidance all the way through, so we can somehow or other have this loving connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so this purport, Srila Prabhupada makes it very clearly that human civilization, due to ignorance, fallen into a suffering, miserable condition. We can see why we have so much tribulations and suffering in this world, because it's ignorance. Simple as that. Simple ignorance. Ignorance is a cause of all suffering. And so we are suffering in the material world. We've forgotten our real identity. So the great rishis, the great sages, not to speak of the Mahajanas, the great authorities, they're here to help us, to remind us, enlighten us. What is devotion service? And get out of this trap of the material energy. So, Akashila Prabhupada says here, by advancing in material comforts, the human being puts himself into a more miserable condition. But illusioned by the material energy, he always thinks himself happy, even while in the midst of misery. Such misery of human life is distinct from the natural, comfortable life enjoyed even by the animals. So, being in denial of the absolute truth, what can be the result? The result is suffering. There's no excuse to break the laws of nature. And laws of nature are set. So we have to respect it, we have to abide by those principles of nature, and then we can at least mitigate the suffering of the material world. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, those who regulate their senses, eating, sleeping, mating, defending, they can mitigate at least. We can get by in the material world, so we can peacefully execute our devotional service. Even as devotees, we have to be very conscious of being regulated, so we can remain peaceful in consciousness. We cannot never neglect our duties. We have to, preferably as regulated as possible. Difficult, but sometimes we just have to do it. Otherwise, very difficult to break away from these lower modes of nature. And that's why we see different kinds of devotees also in a neophyte stage, because they may not be so regulated. So their consciousness is disturbed, the mind is disturbed. There's an offense is happening, unfortunately. But by intelligence, we can rise above this. Therefore, we have to study Srila Prabhupada's books very carefully, attentively. And questions and answers are very important amongst the devotees, so we can clarify things. We should not remain in an illusion. No, spiritual life is not automated. We have to make the effort. Some sincere effort has to be made. And we are very fortunate to have, so that we can stay in the family of Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. We help each other in the service of Krishna, trying to understand his purports, and things become more and more clear to us. Our life is meaningful, and we have a very sublime objective, which is to please Krishna and ultimately return back home, back to Godhead. So I'd like to conclude this purport here. So I'd like to read something about Madhvacharya. I'm not sure we have enough time. I'm trying to. So this is It's a very beautiful biography of Madhvacharya. I compiled notes here, so I'm just going to read sections. I'm not going to read a whole lot, it takes time. The life and teachings of Madhvacharya. So anyone knows what Madhvacharya is? Any one of you? Madhvacharya? Okay. Madhvacharya is very important, very prominent acharya, actually one of the most important. Brahma, our sampradaya is called Brahma, Madhvacharya, Gaudiya sampradaya. So Madhvacharya, as I'll read the verse, Madhvacharya is actually an incarnation of Vayudev. And he appeared in this sampradaya. And he took shelter of Vyasadeva. That's a very interesting story also. So Madhvacharya is a very, very powerful, we call Sampradaya Acharya. He's one of the most powerful acharyas in our Brahma line. Brahmaji, Lord Brahma, is the originator, the original guru of this Sampradaya. And Madhvacharya appeared around the 11th, 12th century, and he had a very interesting purpose, similar to Ramanuja in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. So Madhvacharya is a very powerful teacher. His name is mentioned, and very beautiful stories. And I was reading, read the notes here if you don't mind, so I'll just read here. So Madhvacharya was born in 1238. So, yep, at Pajaka Kshetra, a small village situated 5 miles southeast of Udupi, a small town on the western coast of South India. Udupi is a very beautiful little town on the west coast of South India. And there's a very beautiful deity there, self-manifested deity, Udupi Krishna. Very beautiful. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited these temples. They were the Tattvavadis, the philosophers. And Madhvacharya personally installed this deity, as we read the story here. His philosophy writings have distinguished him as one of India's greatest spiritual masters. His teachings were holistic, polytheistic. After Gautama Buddha philosophically liberated the imprisoned minds of India's ritualistic worshippers who had missed the essential purport and import of the Vedas, many years later, Sankara re-established the Vedas as the literary standard of spiritual knowledge. While Buddha chose not to comment on the existence of God, Sankara, through Vedic reference, posited the theory of Advaita Vedanta, non-dualism. Later, Ramanuja brought a light in a philosophical paradigm shift the theistic understanding of the Vedas, revealing the personal aspect of Godhead. Madhva is also known as Madhva or Madhvacharya, followed Ramanuja historically, and his theistic rendering of Vedic knowledge in uncertain terms laid stress on what Ramanuja had alluded to, devotion as both a means and ends to God realization. So, obviously, the scholarly presentation, great scholarly research on the life of Ramanuja and Madhvacharya. They're very classic teachers. Srila Prabhupada often recalls their life, biography, life in his purports. Madhvacharya was extraordinary, Ramanuja was extraordinary. Ramanuja was the incarnation of Lakshman. Ramanuja means the younger brother of Lord Ram. Nuja means brother. So they all had their powerful mission to establish the Vaishnava Siddhanta as it is. Achintya Bheda Bheda, one and different at the same time, which is challenging to many of the Sankara followers. So even to the present day, there are philosophical debates in South India, not just amongst the Sri Vaishnava and the Shivites or Sankara, but also Madhva Sampradaya. Very interesting to note that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in Madhva Brahma Sampradaya, Brahma Madhya Gaudiya Sampradaya. And so this Sampradaya is blessed by Mahaprabhu, obviously. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu even further simplified the Vaishnava teachings, which explained by the Goswamis and to the current line, coming down gradually, Narottama Das Thakur, coming down gradually to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta, and Srila Prabhupada, and to our present day. The confusion about Sankara and somewhat Buddha's teaching was not satisfactory for the seekers of real knowledge, the scholars who actually wanted to understand the original, I would say, the true purpose of the Vedas. Therefore, there were debates. So Madhvacharya was empowered Shakyaveda avatar, an empowered incarnation, who was an extraordinary personality in every way. His whole life, his achievements, his teachings, how he's defeating the Mayavada, the impersonalists. Similarly to Ramanuja Sampradaya. So often we call the Sampradayas after the great prominent Sampradaya Acharyas. Depends on the context. Sometimes we call it Gaudiya Sampradaya, sometimes we call Brahma Sampradaya, or Madhva Sampradaya. It's the same. Brahma, Madhya, Gaudiya Sampradaya. So Madhva traveled the length and breadth of India, visiting sacred places, and at every opportunity he expanded his teachings. He was a prolific writer as well as a great saint. He wrote commentaries on Vedanta Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Mahabharata. He also established a strict standard of temple ritual at Udupi, which is still intact today. Madhva's father, Sri Madhyageha Bhatta, and his wife originally lived in Kadiyali, a small village near Udupi. Aggrieved by the loss of 2 sons, they moved to the village of Pajaka Kshetra. Every day, Madhyageha and his wife would go to Udupi from Prajaka Kshetra and pray to the deity for the blessings of an illustrious son. So they were praying for a great soul to descend. They performed this austerity for 12 years. One day, during a temple festival, one of the priests climbed the flagpole and announced that soon the god of the wind, Vayu, would be born on earth and perform many uncommon deeds. Shortly thereafter, the prophecy was fulfilled, and 2 were blessed with a male child, whom they named Vasudev, later to be known as Madhva Acharya. So Vasudev, that was his early name, childhood name. On several occasions, Vasudev revealed that he was not an ordinary son. Once Madhyageha had accrued some debts. His father had some debts. The persistent creditor came to the house and sat on the doorstep, announcing that he had decided to fast until the debt was repaid. Seeing Madhyageha's anxiety, Vasudeva decided to save the situation. He took the creditor behind the water tank under a big tamarind tree, grabbed a handful of tamarind seeds, and poured them into the hands of the creditor. The creditor first thought that the child was simply playing, but looking again at his hands, he saw that the seeds had turned into just enough gold coins to repay the debts. So obviously, extraordinary pastimes, not an ordinary human. He had all these powers, mystic powers, and he could do incredible things. And his strength, bodily strength also, was extraordinary. Wonderful as Vasudeva was, his father, out of affection, wanted to give him an education. Thus he performed the Akshara Abhashayam, the ceremony which the child begins his schooling. One day, soon after his first studies, Vasudeva had a chance to rest his learning in a nearby village, Nayampali. A Brahmana named Shiva was delivering lectures on the Puranas, and Vasudeva's parents had brought the young child with them to attend the discourse. A difficult passage came, and the Brahmana was visibly perplexed, unable to expound the clear meaning of the text. He spoke anyway, and suddenly Vasudeva also spoke up, revealing the true intent of the aphorism to the astonishment of the assembly. Just like if you read Gauriya Lila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nimai Pandit, we call him Nimai Pandit, because even in his early stages, especially when he became a young boy, he was such a brilliant intellect. He could defeat all the pandits, even in his childhood, not to speak of later on. So he was known as Nimai Pandit. Similarly, Madhvacharya was like that too. He could defeat all the opponents, all the debaters, all the philosophical discourses. He always came to the conclusion of pure, unalloyed devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So great devotees have the intellectual, scriptural capacity to take up any challenge, because Vaishnava Siddhanta is not a sentiment, it's actually very scientific, systematic, and everything has an answer. So the Vaishnavas are prepared for any debate. Srila Prabhupada was encouraging the devotees to study carefully, study his books, because there'll be philosophical debates. People will challenge us. We should not back up. We should defend the philosophy. We should defend the Vaishnava theology, so we can establish Sanatana Dharma for this age as far as possible. The devotees are eager to spread Krishna consciousness, so we should also study. We as much as possible, well versed in the Shastras, so we can take up a debate if necessary. Srila Prabhupada, we can see Prabhupada's morning walks or lectures or classes, any challenge came, Prabhupada could answer very clearly based on Shastric references. So he was very, very prepared, not to speak of being a Mahabhagavata, a great pure Vaishnava himself. So obviously purity is the most important, sincerity and purity. And then we have the scriptural knowledge. So we have references. So we can refer. So Madhvacharya, who was known as Vasudeva in his childhood, he had a highly developed intellect, we can see, and he could defeat any opponents, especially from the Sankara and a Buddhist, nihilistic or any other confusion, because there are all kinds of philosophies. Even to the present day, there's a lot of philosophies in India, very contradictory. The Vaishnavas should be very confident. that we have the actual Vedanta, the conclusion of the Vedas. Because the true Vedanta, anta means the ending, the conclusions, is really coming to understand who Krishna is and our relationship with him. And we see, even in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we gradually go up to the 10th canto, when we actually come to a point that this is the ultimate conclusion. So we know our destination. This is our aim, this is our goal, this is our objective. So we can actually we can come to a conclusion that we have a relationship with Krishna, the Supreme Original Personality. And he has got a loving pastimes, a loving transcendental abode, and we have a part in that. We actually we call Nitya Swarupa, original connection with Krishna. So this requires a systematic study, obviously. And Srila Prabhupada, out of his unlimited kindness and mercy, blessings, he made these purports very simple and clear, so we can comprehend, even ordinary devotees can comprehend things and build their knowledge gradually. Therefore, keeping the association of devotees are very important, because we can discuss these things. So just quickly, we've got a few minutes. So there's many childhood pastimes here. I'd just like to read about the Udupi Krishna, and he actually I'll not just say this simply. There is too much to read otherwise. Madhvacharya had a few disciples, and they were highly trained to defend Vaishnava theology, Siddhanta philosophy. And they're very loyal to him. And just as Sri Ramanuja and Madhvacharya, they were powerful personalities who could take up all the debates and establish the Siddhanta. They all had their individual pastimes. And one time he a very beautiful story here too. Madhvacharya then felt the desire to journey into the higher Himalayas, to the hidden Badrinath, or place of Vyasa. He prepared for the journey by observing 48 days of fasting and silent meditation. Before his final departure, he wrote to his disciples, "This place is holy. Vishnu is the Supreme. My word is meant for the good of all. I have to pay respects to Vyasa. I may or may not return. May God bless you." Ending his journey, Madhvacharya slowly moved to the sacred area where Veda Vyasa was sitting, surrounded by the rishis. There, from the mouth of Vyasa, he received the blessings to write his commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. So you can see, he actually met Vyasa there personally. So such an exalted personality. Because Vyasa there is still present. May not be visible to us, but visible to pure souls like Madhvacharya. And he's up in the Badrinath ashram in the high Himalayas, and he's in transcendental samadhi, surrounded by great sages, rishis, even to the present day. Difficult for us to comprehend this, but he's present in the spiritual dimension. So Madhvacharya had the opportunity to meet him personally, so he took guidance from him. So we can see how Srila Prabhupada explains about the chain of disciplic succession in the Bhagavad Gita. We have Lord Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, and Madhvacharya. So you can see the connections coming down. All there's a huge gap between them regarding time, because Vyasa appeared 5,000 years ago, and Madhvacharya appeared, many thousand years, maybe another 3,000 years later. So you can see that Madhvacharya had the pure transcendental potency and divine consciousness to approach him and visualize him and have taken instructions from Vyasadeva. We cannot visualize Vyasadeva that way. We don't have that transcendental blessings or opportunity. We can visualize Vyasadeva by hearing his transcendental purports, reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, by hearing and accepting the teachings. That's how we can see him. So this is a very good, just a little story before we go. Udupi was to become the seat of Madhva's transcendental ontology of Dvaita Vada. It was this time that one of the most significant events of his life occurred. While bathing in the sea, Madhva noticed a merchant seaman in distress. High winds had made his approach to the shore hazardous and had run aground on a sandbar. So there was an accident. There was a tidal waves and a ship run aground. From the shore, Madhva, waving his cloth, directed the sailor safely to the shore. Upon arriving safely, the captain felt greatly indebted to Madhvacharya and expressed his desire to offer him a gift. Madhvacharya consented, asked for a large piece of clay, value of which was insignificant. But much to the astonishment of everyone, inside the clay, which was a big tilak, was a large deity of Krishna. The news spread throughout Udupi. The deity was installed in the temple. Thus, Madhva school became firmly established in Udupi. And to this day, the deity is worshipped by numerous followers of Madhvacharya. This is a very interesting story also, because when the clay tilak broke in half, Udupi Krishna appeared, not so large, and that Krishna, later known as Udupi Krishna, was actually worshipped by Rukmini in Dwapar Yuga, before in Krishna's advent. And there was major devastation in Dwarka. As you know, Dwarka sank in the ocean, so the deity was lost. Somehow or other, by mystical arrangement, obviously divine arrangement, the deity was found, and Madhvacharya personally installed this deity in Udupi. So he's known as Udupi Krishna. So many stories, beautiful stories about Udupi Krishna. And Udupi Krishna was actually very heavy, physically heavy. So he asked his disciples to carry from the seashore to Udupi, like a heavy, big, like a marble stone, basically. And the disciples, they couldn't actually carry it. It was so heavy. So Madhvacharya personally picked up the deity. It was so powerful physically. It was incredibly powerful. Not to mention that he was the incarnation of Vayudev. So he brought Udupi Krishna and installed, and to the present day, still worshipped with great pomp. If you go to Udupi, the Brahmins, the followers of Madhvacharya, they worship the deity with great hymns and mantras, and it's a constant chanting of mantras, glorifying the supreme pastimes of Krishna. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also visited Udupi. So great acharyas in our line also visited Udupi. Udupi Krishna is very significant for our sampradaya. So Madhvacharya, sampradaya, acharya, and later on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu decided mercifully to appear in our sampradaya and known as Gaudiya Sampradaya. So Brahma, Madhya, Gaudiya Sampradaya. Very powerful personalities. We can see our lineage, transcendental lineage, since time memorial. Back to Lord Brahma, who was the first created being, most powerful demigod, received transcendental knowledge from Narayan, Krishna himself, and passed down, coming down to Narada, Vyasa, Madhvacharya. And Madhvacharya was very significant to defeat all the upper sampradayas or deviations, particularly Mayavada, impersonalism. And he established the fact that God is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's a Supreme Person. Ishvaraha, Paramaha, Krishnaha, Sachidananda Vigraha. He's got a beautiful form, very beautiful form. So he established that, yes, he has a beautiful form, he's a personality, extraordinary personality. So all the great acharyas, the Mahajanas, they always establishing the fact that the Vaishnava Siddhanta comes out the supreme theology, the supreme Siddhanta. We go to the root cause of everything. Sarva Karana Karanam, cause of all causes. So Madhvacharya is very important for our studies. So it's nice to read his life and beautiful stories. There's much more to it, obviously. This is just a few highlights of his life. That who he was an incarnation of Vayu to empower this line, Brahma Sampradaya, and also defeat the opponent philosophers who had a disagreement with the Brahma Sampradaya, and establish the Dharma for this. Then preparing, obviously, getting ready for the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also. So this is a very beautiful pastimes of Madhvacharya. I encourage everyone to read and study about Madhvacharya. Any questions or comments? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Madhvacharya ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.